Welcome to another episode of Home Sweet Home. My name is Rod McCall.
And I'm Scott Nichols.
Hey, what in the heck is new with you?
So, yeah, it's just been really busy working on master's degree. So it's just been a lot going on.
Yeah?
Doing these weekly podcasts is going to get challenging.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of the fun part.
It is.
Life is all about challenges, and I applaud you for, moving forward with your master's program. I always felt like it was more fun than a bachelor's degree, but it was a lot more work. But I was more invested in it, and I wanted to do really well. And so therefore,
yeah, I mean, pretty much every class is something that I'm interested in. So that's a good thing, right? You don't have to do like the low level stuff that. It's all about what I want to do. So
sure. Well,
that's always good.
And speaking of school, that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe we could talk a little bit about today, because you and I can talk about school because, I don't know.
I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Every day.
But one of the things, that is challenging, because I have my nephews, and they, a lot of times will come and hang out with us in the afternoons after school and wait for their mom or dad to come pick them up.
Sure.
And so I'm always saying, hey, what's going on? What happened at school today? What was fun at school today? Nothing. One word answers. And so I'm always trying to come up with different ways to inquire as to get them to talk about school, because I can remember my mom always saying, well, what was something fun that happened at school today? Or tell me about your day. And I would rattle off all kinds of things that we did, and that would spark all kinds of conversations.
Wow.
And
I'm sure you would keep some of that back and not tell her what you actually did.
Oh, well, yeah,
Right.
Once you get past like 4th, 5th grade, you're not saying everything.
I mean, back in the day when they used to mail report cards, I used to have to rush home and try to get it before my parents did.
Yeah, the good old days. So I was thumbing through a bunch of different things. I'm always looking for new stuff, and I ran across an interesting article, and it was 10 questions to ask kids beyond how was school today? And I thought, okay, so I'm always looking into, anybody can post anything. So I always look at your credentials. And so the lady that wrote this, her name is Amy Morin, and she is a licensed clinical social worker.
Right.
She's a college professor and has written multiple books, including 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do, 13 things mentally strong parents don't do, and 13 things strong kids do, and a few others. And I mean, her books have sold over 1 million copies and have been reprinted in 40 different languages.
Wow.
So I figure she's got pretty good bona fides. I mean, she's been on the Today Show, Good Morning America, CNN, CNBC, Fox News, a wide variety of things. And so I thought, okay, well, let's give it a look-see. And I have to say that I kind of like it.
Yeah.
And I've even...
So is it like, is it going from a more general kind of a question?
It's, instead of talking about, how was school today? It was fine. Did you do anything interesting? No, it was boring. Getting away from those kinds of responses to a more open-ended kind of question that leads to making them talk not maybe about, lessons or homework or stuff like that, but something a little more in depth. Different things I've asked my nephew or nephews when they come over. Well, what'd you have for lunch?
Right.
Or what'd you play at recess? And stuff like that. Things that are usually a little more entertaining for them and can, generate something more than a single word.
So basically, like we do in teaching, right? So we are supposed to be asking questions often of students, and asking questions that cannot be answered with a yes or a no. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They elicit more thinking and have to require a better, a more, a greater response.
Yeah.
right, than just yes or no, right? So that's a yes or no is a closed-ended question where there's no other conversation.
Yeah.
And of course, kids, if they will do the shortest answer they possibly can. So if it can elicit a yes or no, they'll just give you one of those.
Well, exactly. And I think that when you can get a kid to talk more about school, they can see that there's some positives besides having to go and sit in a class and, go from class to class. And then there's always the homework aspect. And, some of the downsides to school, there's, get him to focus on something a little more positive about the fun stuff. Because there is a lot of fun stuff that happens at school, even if a kid doesn't really want to recognize or admit it. And so I think that, so I think that's kind of the whole point. And I wasn't a stellar student in school.
Sure.
But I always found school to be enjoyable, at least some parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think looking back, that goes back to the way my mom would engage us when we would come home and get us to talk a little bit about some of the things that happened that day.
Right.
And so as I ran across this, I thought, okay, fair enough. And I liked the way that this was approached, because I think as she mentions, all you need is a little bit of creativity on our asking end to get the kids to share a little bit more.
Awesome. So maybe we can get to the meat of this and think about so what if I come home tonight, right, and I sit down and my kid comes home from school. What's something that I can ask them?
Well, one of the things that she says or suggests, and it's tell me about what was the best part of your day.
Ooh, the best part.
And
I like that. It's positive.
Oh, absolutely it does. And it forces them to, think a little bit about their day, process it a little bit.
Right.
And you're right. It hits a positive note rather than automatically going to something negative. Again, like homework or getting bullied a little bit or picked on or made fun of, because I don't care who you are. That happens to pretty much everybody at school at some point. And if not once a day, at least once a week. And so getting them to focus on a positive rather than a negative, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was looking at the next one.
Okay.
Right. And I actually don't like it.
Okay. Explain.
It says she's saying, and, obviously she's a licensed professional,
licensed counsel social worker.
I don't think that she's, I don't think this is a bad question per se, right? I just think that it's, so it says, did anything surprise you today? So here's what I don't like about that.
Okay.
I can say no, and that answers the question.
So it's not an open-ended
So it's not
question.
open-ended, right? So I would modify that and think, okay, so what was something that surprised you today?
Oh,
right?
So reformat
because
the way.
I think that there's always something in a day that's like, oh, that was new, right? I didn't think of that, or that was something that I didn't expect. So what was something that surprised you, right? I think that's a better format. But that just shows you how you can change the question, right? So whatever questions you have been asking, you can modify it so that it's more open-ended.
Well, and that's kind of the point. I don't think you have to repeat these verbatim, but I think the point is, again, getting a different way to ask about a child's day at school. But I agree with you. I think that would be a better way to ask that question, because you're right. There is a lot of things that happen. I mean, crank it down. I plan my day and I'm still surprised. There's always something surprising, because I'll ask a question and the answer I get is like, wow, I wasn't expecting that, or wow, you went in a different direction. And it's kind of interesting, and sometimes that's a good thing.
I don't think that there's anybody that can go through a day knowing exactly what to expect all the time and make it through that day and come through going, my day was exactly the way I expected it to be. I just don't think that's the case, right? So something surprises us all the time. Most jobs deal with some kind of exception. So there's always something. I mean, even if you're on like a manufacturing line, something changes, something goes wrong, somebody does something that surprises you.
Sure. And and it doesn't have to be a negative. It can always be a positive as well. Now, as I'm looking at number 3, I'm thinking of what you just said about number 2. And the question is, who were you proud of today? And you could answer that too with nobody. But I think if you were to rephrase that as to I don't know, something that now that I'm thinking about this out loud, it didn't, my first thought didn't fit, but I suppose you could say maybe something to the like of, what did somebody do that made you proud of them today?
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know, something like that. But again, the idea is to promote this idea of a positive response. Maybe somebody helped you today. Somebody held a door open for you, or loaned you a pencil or a sheet of paper, or helped you with a difficult assignment. Or maybe you
Sure.
guys collaborated and they did their share. They did half the work and you did the other half. You didn't have to do it all and they took from you. Or you had no clue and they just said, hey, don't worry about it. I know what to do. And they did it for you.
Yeah. I think this one's, yes, it can elicit a one-word answer.
Yeah.
And so that's tough, but I think you can stick to it. Like, no, you got to give me a name. Like, who were you proud of today?
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's what the question's asking. Nobody isn't a name. Who is the actual person, right? That you were proud of. And for me, like, as I'm thinking about this, that can be themselves, right? Like, I was proud of me today for something I did.
Sure. Because then again, the idea is to get them to look back, reflect, because I think a lot of growth in ourselves, dealing with pride in ourselves, feeling self-worth, can come from a reflection. Yeah. And I mean, you and I talk about reflection all the time, off air and stuff like that. We have our team meetings where we reflect.
Mm-hmm.
What worked, what didn't work.
Yep.
So, all right. Now, I like this next one. And it simply states, when did you feel proud of yourself today?
Yeah. And this one could be answered in the previous one if they're proud of themselves. But if they were proud of somebody else, then obviously, you should be proud of something you did today, too.
Well, because, again, it's going back to accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a person has to repeat all 10 of these, but you can fluctuate, 2 or 3 of these a day.
Sure.
But again, the idea is to give acknowledgement to someone who, again, whether it's yourself or someone else, who did something a little bit extra, a little bit above and beyond.
And I think this kind of question always brings me back to that book I read by James Clear, the Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
And that book is such a great book, right? To talk about, you should be proud of yourself just for getting up and making the bed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if that's the only thing you do all day, you started your day on a good note. You did something, you accomplished something, you got it done. Right? And then when you come back at the end of the day and you get in your bed, it's going to feel good because, like, the bed is made.
Mm-hmm.
And so, rather than being messy, right? And so, I mean, you can be proud of yourself for that. And so, being proud of yourself doesn't mean you did some major accomplishment. You became an astronaut today. It just means that you did something that was like 1% better than yesterday.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And so that means, and if you do that every day, you're like 365% better or more.
Well,
at the end of the year, right? Like, so
yeah,
that's a huge accomplishment for most people.
And again, you're right. It doesn't have to be major. It could be simply, well, you always see the same kids sitting by themselves at lunch. So you sit with them, or you say, hey, why don't you come sit with us today? Or you play with them at recess, or you include them in some form or fashion. It's a new kid at school. And so you introduced yourself and said, hey, I'd like to be your friend.
Right.
Little things. It doesn't require a lot of big stuff, but something small to you could be something big to someone else.
Right.
So, which ties right into number 5. What is one thing that would have made your day even better?
The lottery.
Oh, fair enough.
If I had won the lottery, my day would be so much better. We would sit in a professional studio to do this instead of this room that we use.
Yes.
So,
yeah, because luckily they don't charge us rent.
Right.
But no, and I think that what I like about this question is it explores, again, exploration, but instead of looking backwards, you look backwards to look forward. What could I have done better?
Yeah.
And again, recognizing room for improvement, things, goals to strive for, something of that point. But again, I like the way that, and I agree with Amy that these are good reflection questions for the most part. Because, sometimes things happen during the day. We get a little frustrated. Man, I will admit that I'm kind of lazy, and I'll always find an easier way if I can. And sometimes I go, I just don't feel like it. And then I look back and I go, man, I should have done it. And so tomorrow, okay, there we go, tomorrow.
Right.
So
I mean, I like this one. I think there's a little bit of caution here.
Okay.
Right. Not to, when you're talking about what's something I could have done better, it's easy to then start to camp out on that and get into all the negatives of the day.
True.
Right. You're just reflecting to say, hey, here's the one thing, like, I could have done that better. Like, make a note.
Yeah.
Next time I'm going to focus and be 1% better at that next time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easy to go down that rabbit hole and move right into like almost depression or, over that, or get anxiety related to it. Like, reflection isn't about like beating yourself up.
Sure.
Right.
And I think that's where we as a parent can, help a child not do that. Yeah. And it's kind of like, well, okay, that's fine. It's if you can't, that's fine. Or if you're suddenly coming up with a laundry list of things, wait. Let's focus on something we can control.
Right.
And all we have to do is tomorrow's a new day. Let's try it.
So I think that's where, rather than these questions being an interview,
yeah,
it should be a discussion of, maybe even, here's something that I thought I could have done better today. What do you got?
Yeah. And that's,
right.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's, the parent needs to be honest with the child and show that even adults have struggles with these things.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have it all down.
No, not at all.
So we're still learning, and they're learning, and that's okay, right? You
Absolutely.
You don't get born and come into the world and show up, and or even leave high school and be perfect.
Oh, amen.
Right? I mean,
amen.
It's a struggle to learn all those things, right?
Well,
get to be our age where you finally know everything or almost nothing.
Yeah, no. I
see. The older I get, the less I know.
Thank you. I tell my students all the time, I wish I was half as smart today as I thought I was when I was 17, 18 years old.
Right.
So.
But you can beat yourself up, and we don't want to do that.
No.
We want to reflect and show our kids that, we have struggles too, and we're working to fix those things. So I think that goes a long way to helping kids realize, like, I'm not alone in this.
Sure.
This is a normal human thing.
Well, and if you ask that question, you can follow it up with this next one, which is, what was then the most interesting thing you learned? And what I like about this is it could be anything. I mean, it could be a math or a science or a history or some story that they read.
Sure.
But it could also be a little bitty juicy gossip that they heard, or something that they observed, or something. It's so broad.
Right.
It could be, hey, I learned that if I dipped my carrots into something other than ranch dressing, it actually tasted pretty good.
Sure.
I can't think of what would be better than ranch dressing, but again, I don't know. So, but again,
for a carrot, I have no idea. Maybe an onion dip.
Oh, okay. Or a zesty Southwest ranch.
Okay. Well, that's still a ranch.
That's true. That is a ranch. Okay. But anyway.
But
I like that question. Again. So, and then, and I will say that one of the things that I wouldn't mind in our school day, because again, here at the secondary level, at a high school, we don't get recess. And there are times where I would enjoy being able to go outside.
Sure.
So, and I say that because the next question is, I've tried that. Hadn't always worked as well as I wanted it. But,
sure.
One of the next question basically is, well, what did you play during recess? And I've used this one with my nephew because he's, just now into 5th grade. So they still get recess. Mm-hmm. And I always like that one. Because recess is a fun thing. No matter, I've yet to meet a kid who absolutely hates recess. I haven't met Sheldon Cooper in real life, but for the rest of us, recess is a lot of fun. So,
yeah, definitely not hating recess.
No, not at all. In fact, I'm not even sure I'm a big fan of forcing kids all the time to lose recess because they don't turn in their work.
I am definitely not a fan of that. I'm surprised that you're not a fan of that, but I'm definitely not a fan of that.
Well, I mean, I can see once in a while. I mean, but at the same time, I'm learning more and more that kids can learn in many different ways.
Right.
And sometimes going outside and playing and doing, like my mom or dad would say, well, go outside and get the stink blowed off you.
Right.
And you need to.
So it's interesting, right? Because in my master's program that I'm working on now, I actually commented on this very topic.
Really?
Of recess and the difference between elementary schools and high schools, right? Because high schools don't have a recess.
Yeah.
Elementary schools do. However, high schools have, in the high school we teach in, we have a 7-minute passing period between our classes.
Yeah.
And so that gives the students a chance to walk or run.
No, some of them do.
To meet up with friends, to use the restroom, to, go grab a snack, to do whatever during that time. And so they have a little bit of free time. And it's not a lot, right? But it's some. Whereas in oftentimes, but certainly in the lower grades of elementary school, you are in the same room for 90% of the day.
Oh, that's true.
And you transition between subjects, but you don't get a lot of time.
True.
And teachers are increasingly making it so that there's even less time, right? We want to have a 45-second transition to the next thing. And your brain needs a chance to disengage from one
to re-engage from somewhere
refresh
else.
and then engage into a new. And so I was asking the question of when is the transition too little?
Ooh.
When is it that at the point that we've taken too much of that transition away in favor of instructional time, and then we lose the value of that instructional time because the kid's not ready for it. So I think that recess and some kind of downtime is important, right? To disengage your brain and then re-engage it into something new. And so playing at recess is important.
Well, and that's why,
seeing your friends between classes, important.
We have our study hall, period. And I like that. I let my kids in my advisory, hey, you want to do homework. But if you don't want to do homework, or you want to just play on your phone, play a game, take 25 minutes and just kind of relax a little, I'm all in favor of that.
Yeah, I think if the student is not way behind on everything, right? That's good, right?
Yeah.
That they can make that choice if they're making good choices in other places.
Well, yeah, and that's where it kind of comes back to, even if you took a 1 or 2 days out of a 5-day week to do that,
right?
To do work, you still got other days. Yeah. So I don't know.
I think this next one is really important, right?
Okay.
In our society, we are so divided. We are downright mean on social media.
Can be.
There's all kinds of depression and even suicidal thoughts based on what kids see on social media.
Yeah.
There's just terrible things taking place, right?
Sure.
Out there. And we are just mean. And we tend to be more mean when we don't see the person right in front of us.
Yeah.
So social media makes that pretty easy, right? Especially if you don't know the person. But we don't really have a lot of focus necessarily on being kind. And if we could shift ourselves into being kind and ask that question, right? Who were you kind to today? And put that out in front of the student and ourselves, right? We need to be kind. We want people to be kind to us. Why aren't we being kind to other people? We don't know what's going on in their lives.
It is a two-way street. If you want people to be kind to you, you got to be kind to others. And it doesn't have to be something extravagant, but it could be something as simple as, again, loaning a writing utensil, a pen or a pencil, a sheet of paper. As the teacher says, hey, on a blank sheet of notebook paper, why don't you write these down? And you're pulling your paper out and you go, hey, here, have a sheet of paper.
Right.
Or they're scrambling for something to write with and you give them something to write with, to borrow. It doesn't have to be magnanimous big item. It can be just a simple kind gesture, because you're right. And this kind of goes back to one of the other questions of what did you do, something proud or something you're proud of that you did today. And so again, you're right. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's amazing the mental, how that affects your mood. When you do something nice for somebody, you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's important. And, we hear as government teachers, we hear all the time, well, freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. Like I can teach you about what that really means. But let's just go with it's free. You're free to say whatever you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you believe, then that's fine. You're also free to restrain yourself from saying whatever you want.
Sure.
Right. And I think that the ability to restrain yourself from saying certain things shows a maturity, right? That we really need again, in this country. I came up with something the other day because this came up again in my master's program.
Okay.
Everything does. So I'm sorry, listeners, if you keep hearing about my master's program, maybe you want to go do your own master's program or not. But I came up with this thing in one of my writings, and I'm not aware that anybody else has ever said this.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular phrase, but I said, words are free, and the right words are gold, increasing in value exponentially over time.
True.
Right? And this is related back to my experience in middle school and a teacher that said something to me that meant something to me. And I still remember it today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of why I do what I do. So, what you say to somebody sticks, and it's a matter of it's free for you, right?
Yeah.
You can offer somebody kindness and it doesn't cost you anything.
Not really.
And it's going to come back to you,
Tenfold.
in good ways.
Mm-hmm.
But that kindness is going to help them maybe for the rest of their life.
And that's where
you say the wrong thing.
Well, yes.
And it can damage them for the rest of their life.
That's kind of where I was going with. And that's what I'm going to quote here from Amy. She says, by asking this question, it prompts your child to consider how their acts of kindness have the power to impact others.
Right.
And so I absolutely like that. And I agree totally with what you're saying as well about words. They can build you or they can destroy you.
And they don't cost anything.
No, both directions. Well, we're almost to the end, so I'd like to get there quickly. I like this next one, number 9. It says, what's something new you'd like to try at school?
Calculus.
Yeah, not me. Me and math had a come to Jesus talk years and years ago, but I think it kind of pushes kids to kind of be, again, with this reflection, going back, well, okay, I want to try. And that it pushes or encourages them to extend something that maybe they've been thinking about, but they haven't verbalized.
Yeah.
And so by doing so, they can explore new options.
So just to give some ideas, right? Like this could be some kind of a club.
Uh-huh.
It could be music. It could be theater,
Mm-hmm.
right? So those are typically courses that you also take, and they're typically they can be clubs as well.
Sure.
Depending on if your school has clubs, it might be you get into a veterinary class or some kind of career and technical education type class that would give you a skill that maybe doesn't have to take you all the way to college, right?
Sure.
So because not everybody has to go to college.
Well, and then you mentioned like clubs. Okay, it could be I want to learn how to play chess so I can be on the chess. I'm going to join the chess club so I can learn how to play chess, or speech and debate, or whatever it might be. We have a ping pong club.
Yeah.
So that's the point I think you're trying to get at. It's everywhere.
Right. And here's what. So if somebody's listening in an area where they don't have these things in their schools, I want to challenge people to encourage more funding for your schools so that you can have programs for kids that can help them do more than just, I have to go to college, or I have to do this thing, or I have to do that thing, right? Provide options, right? Try to get the schools to provide options to the students.
Well, it's not very expensive to buy a chess set. You can buy them for, $10, $15. You can probably get them cheaper at some of your,
In my own community, they do this at the library, the local library. So sometimes you can find other organizations to do these things in as well.
Well, the last one, her last suggestion, I absolutely love best. What's a mistake you made today that you learned from? And I like it because it helps us recognize that mistakes are not failures.
Right.
Mistakes are learning opportunities.
Yeah.
I have made so many learning opportunities per day, never mind in a lifetime. And so I like this. And I think, and again, I'm going to quote here from Amy. She said, it's not something to be embarrassed about.
No.
And in fact, she even goes so far as to say, it's not a sign of your intelligence if you make a mistake. So if we can understand that we made an oops, okay, you made an oops. Congratulations. Welcome to the human race. What did you learn from it?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that because I think that can be probably of these 10, this might be one of the most powerful out there.
Yeah.
And
I think that's important. So, I mean, I'd hate to say that if you've never failed, you've never learned, because you can learn from other people's mistakes.
True.
However, I think if you've never failed, you haven't learned as much.
Well, you haven't tried very hard
as
either.
Somebody else, right? Because the learning gain is greater if you fail than if you just watch somebody else. Because failure is personal.
Exactly.
And it deals with more than just whatever the failure was, right? It deals with, well, what about me, and how do I feel about it, and what do I think about that, and how's that going to affect me in the future emotionally? And, so there's more to deal with and to learn from than just the actual, I wasn't very good at those math problems today.
Well, and that's, yes. And I think that in all of these questions, I would not ask all 10. I'd ask maybe 2 or 3. And different ones, different days, and actually engage in active listening. As a parent, show active interest. Be engaged with their responses. Maintain eye contact. Because that way you can encourage this kind of communication. And if you can talk about these things with your kids, maybe they'll be willing to open up about other things as well. And you now have a good communication with your children that you can now be able to see and help address issues like anxiety, depression, find out about bullying, find out about, all their, not all of them, but at least a few of their concerns. And we can help our children.
Yeah, and I think contributing to the conversation yourself, right, and being open, and it's always easier when somebody is open, right, and being honest for you to open up to them. And so doing that more, I think what you'll find after a few times of this would be that your kids would come home and just volunteer information, and then maybe ask you, "How was your day?" Right, and so it might turn into something like that.
Sure. And one of the last things that Amy suggests here, and I think back, choose your timing. Best time of the day to ask kids about their day may not be as soon as they get off the bus and walk in the door, but maybe over dinner or something of that sort, when you're engaged in something that's not TV or a video game, where you can have their undivided attention. And if you've got multiple children or there's multiple family members together, you can all take turns, sharing and answering this question, like you say, so that mom and dad can demonstrate, appropriate answers or appropriate ways as well. So again, it can be a family learning environment, because a family that I truly do believe this, a family that can talk together, can play together, can be better together.
One of the things that I've learned as a parent and, in marriage is that the other person doesn't always want you to fix it.
No.
Right. And so, and when they come home, when the person comes home and they're clearly frustrated, the second they walk through the door and you notice they're frustrated isn't the time to say, "What's wrong? What's going on? Give them some time to, think it through. I mean, usually people are just processing things, and maybe a half an hour later or an hour later, it can be like, "Hey, I noticed you were struggling with something. You want to talk about it?"
There you go. Well, I hope that some of these might be valuable. I know that I will be trying some more of these with my nephews when they come over next.
That's awesome.
So,
right.
That wraps us up. Again, I hope that, some of these points provided by licensed professional social worker Amy Morin have been beneficial. Anyway, let us know in the comments. We'll talk to you guys next time. I'm Rod.
I'm Scott.
See ya.
Bye-bye.